Hey, my Nubian people, my African people, my black people. How you doing? This is Ray Jones. I'm going to ask you to subscribe to my YouTube page, Black-Empowerment.org. That's Black-Empowerment.org. You can also like my Black-Empowerment.org page on Facebook, as well as follow me on Twitter at Black-Empowerment.org. And so basically, we're just getting into this week, this Sunday's edition of what was on last week's blog and what's coming up. Last week's blog was about the five black codes of conduct that I spoke on, and basically, just to kind of summarize that whole thing, as black people, we need to put black empowerment at the forefront of everything we're doing, over everything else. I talked about that, putting it over religion, over sexuality, over all of that stuff, basically because once you begin to divide, depending on your religion or your sexuality and all that stuff, you never come back and get together, really. So you have to have a common mind as black people, and it's all of our responsibility as black people to add to that code of conduct. We should study what's already there. Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. has a book. Tariq Nasheed is doing a tour right now on the black codes of conduct. They have their own versions. We need to add to those. We need to apply those where they fit specifically for us, but we need to have a common mind because we got a lot of work to do. All right. And so this week's blog, really quickly, is about non-racist white people. What are their role in demolishing the system of white supremacy? And so, as I've pointed out in other videos, there are two different sets of white people. You have white supremacists, which are racist white individuals, and you have non-racist white people. And so those two groups are there. So we're not talking about all white people being racist or any crap like that. We're talking about the two different groups of white people, a racist group and a non-racist group. And we're basically just talking about this week, in this week's blog, what is the non-racist white person's role in demolishing the system of white supremacy. Basically, I'm speaking on the relations between a racist white person and a non-racist white person. What should it be? What should that relationship look like? And basically, I speak about if you're a non-racist white person, you really should not even have racist white people in your circle, in your personal circle. And I'll tell you why. Let's just start with you as an adult non-racist white person. You have an adult racist friend. Eventually, you're going to be around when that racist friend does something racist, some kind of racist behavior, something going on eventually, whether it's an outlandishly racist friend that does it all the time, or if it's a friend that just does it occasionally or whatever, eventually you're going to be around for it. And so as a non-racist white person, you only have about 3 options in that situation. Well, actually 4, but I recommend the 4th. But the first one, the first reaction you could have as a non-racist white person having a racist white friend, okay, and they're doing racist behavior and racist activity around you, the first thing you can do is participate. Which at that point, clearly you're not just a non-racist friend, you are a racist yourself. If you're acting and participating in the same racist acts, clearly you decategorize, you take yourself out of the category of being a non-racist individual into now, of course, you're obviously racist. Okay. The second thing that you can do as a non-racist white person when a racist white friend is doing racism, the next thing you can do is turn and look away from it. You can turn and look away from what that racist friend is doing. And at that point, that actually makes you worse than a racist. You actually become worse than the racists themselves. It's equivalent to knowing that, let's say someone is being sexually molested and you stand by and allow this act to continue. You're not the one doing the sexual molestation, but you know about it and you're not doing anything. That makes you an aid or someone who's also molesting the person because you're not doing anything about it, and you're also a coward. So if you're a non-racist white person, you just allow other white individuals to perpetuate racism around you, you're worse than a racist to begin with. All right, and the third thing that you can do is to maybe speak to them about it. Say, hey man, hey, we don't get down like that. That's not cool to be racist. But unfortunately, if a person has a philosophy on being a racist individual, usually a conversation is not going to convert them into not being so. So ultimately, if you're spending a lot of time and energy trying to convert a racist friend into not being racist, you're going to spend a lot of time and energy probably with no good results. So my philosophy is, my suggestion, if you want to aid in demolishing the system of white supremacy and you want to genuinely end racism, is to not even allow them into your personal circles at all. Now let's take another look at this personal circle. All right, now what if you have children as a non-racist white individual and you have a racist friend? Well, ultimately, even though you say, okay, I'm okay as an adult, I'm not going to be influenced by the racist philosophy. I grew up with this friend. They weren't racist when we were little. They picked it up somewhere. I still love them. And that's understandable. But if you have children, the influence of children is a little bit different. Okay, that adult, children are sponges. That adult is ultimately going to influence that child in some way if you expose your child to a friend that has racist behavior taking place. And also take another step. What if that racist individual has a child themselves? If they have a child themselves, someone who adopts a philosophy of being a racist individual, their child is very susceptible to picking up that philosophy. It's not automatic, but it's very likely that that child will have, racist ideals themselves growing up, or they'll be, again, just exposed to that type of life. Now imagine their child, this racist friend having a child, and their friend, and that racist person having a child, and that child is playing with your kids. Ultimately, your child has like a double whammy. They're going to be influenced by the adult as well as the child. So unfortunately, you really ultimately should not have this racist person again in your circle, influencing you and putting you as an adult in awkward positions, and also their behavior possibly infecting your child with that racist ideology. Also, professionally, let's get into that. If you're a white teacher or a white police officer that is non-racist, you're not a racist, but you're a teacher or a police officer and you're white, again, it is your job, rather directly or indirectly, to expose, call out, and discomfort a racist person doing racist behavior. If it's a white teacher and you're not racist and you see another teacher that is racist and they're demonstrating that racism against other faculty, other students and things like that, it's your job to call them out. Like I said, rather you're going to a position over their head, using the backdoor system in that way, or you're confronting them directly and letting them know, you're not cool with that, or calling them out socially, saying this person is a racist, because, that is your job as a non-racist white person. Because the only options you have at that point, again, is that cowardice role of just absolutely being silent and just standing by and saying, oh, that's just them, that's just how they act. That's not okay. To just stand by is worse of a criminal act than to be doing it yourself. It's worse. All right. And so it's very important. And so basically, here's the thing. We're talking about non-racist white people. White people in general based on ancestry and based on the history of this country as well as globally, but I'll stick to this country, really do owe society the debt of ending racism because your ancestors created racism. Okay, so that's the thing. Now, I'm not going to argue against reparations and that whole argument because trillions of dollars were stolen based on forced labor and all of that stuff. So my ancestors and my brothers and sisters that speak that now about reparations needing to take place, I'm not going to argue against it. But personally, I don't know how it would take place, you know, who would give up what money to whom and all of that stuff. I'm not going to argue against it because, you know, wealth in Europe and all type of things were built on the backs of black slavery. So that does possibly make sense. But even just going further, the two things that I brought out, just professionally and socially, keeping racist people out of your circle is very important. I feel like white people, you know, you owe society not necessarily the money and the reparations argument, but just, you know, as an individual to basically be an upstanding citizen. It doesn't take for you to go out of your way to say, listen, I'm not going to allow a racist to work with me in comfort and demonstrate racism. You should call that out because you're an upstanding person. That's not paying really any debt to black people. That's really just, you should stand up and do so. Okay, not allowing them to infect your children and your own ideals and philosophy by simply, you know, calling them out, not letting them be in your circle. Again, that's not going out of the way. The other thing that a non-racist white person should do in demolishing the system of white supremacy, all right, is teach authentic history. We have a holiday coming up right around the corner here in America, you know, the 4th of July, celebrating Independence Day. But what is that independence? We're talking about the continent of America, white people here in America becoming independent basically from Europe, standing alone as their own, you know, economy and, you know, continent. And so think about that argument that took place. I'm not going to get too deep into it. You can study that. We all should study that and know what in the world we are celebrating. Because when white people here in America were arguing about their independence to Europe, they were saying, listen, you know, God made man, and who can take that away? You know, God gave man free will. We should be free. We want to be free from Europe. And Europe was saying, well, hey, what about those Negroes you got over there? Okay, you practice the institution of slavery. What about their freedom? And then the white people in America said, well, wait a minute, you know, don't mess with my money, mind your business, because Negroes aren't even people. You know, so while we're sitting up as black people celebrating the 4th of July, I know we like to barbecue just on a whim, just on a Wednesday, Tuesday, whatever, we like to barbecue, but, you know, I know a lot of us are still going to barbecue on 4th of July, but you have to really know your history, because what we're celebrating and commemorating the independence of America, you have to understand when this took place, that was about white people being free, so to speak, economically and otherwise from other white people. Black people will still be slaves for the next coming centuries. Okay, we will still be slaves for centuries later because we were slaves. So it wasn't about black people being free. And that's what we have to understand, you know, and be very clear on. It had nothing to do with black people being free or anything like that. So that's what I mean. So when you as a non-racist white person teaches your child or teaches children, period, about what the 4th of July is and why we're commemorating this day, do you simply omit certain facts such as I've just stated and just say, well, this is when America became free and this is why we do fireworks and we celebrate? Because historically, black people have been taught and brainwashed to say, hey, our history isn't important. It's not important to know your history. We've been brainwashed to do so. But racism and white supremacy has also brainwashed other non-racist white people into saying, hey, we're going to omit these details and we're going to leave out certain parts of history and we're just going to regurgitate and state over and over basically the lie or the half-truth, which is still a lie, of what history really is. If you leave out certain parts of history on purpose, or you don't do the research and the work yourself to know what you're really talking about, then you're doing your child a disservice. You're becoming a liar to your child because you're not giving them the full base and reality of what history really is. And so basically teaching authentic history is very important. You know, I've spoken on this subject before. We celebrate Columbus Day, and you know, when you're celebrating Columbus Day and your white child comes to you and say, why do we celebrate Columbus Day? It's cool if you say he's a great explorer or those type of things that may have been good about him that you record in your history. But do you tell the child that the condition of the slave and the slave ships that he was manning and commanding coming over? Do you tell the children about the countless black women that were being raped? That I'm sure he took some part in. Okay, I don't think he was just exclusive from it while everybody else was raping the black women. The near genocide of the Indians once they got here, and how white people really stole the country. I mean, it's an ugly history, but non-racist white people should not be hiding that history or omitting that history or downplaying that history. What a non-racist white person should be doing, if they're going to be authentic and true, is saying, listen, son or daughter, we have a very ugly part of our history. We have a very wicked part of our history, but we've evolved. We don't get down like that. So the same way a non-racist white person will teach a child, hey, we have a family business. In this business, we're bakers, so we're all going to bake. In this business, we're all electricians, so we're all going to have an electronics company and things like that. We're going to be electricians or plumbers or whatever. You should say to that white child, listen, we have an ugly part of our history, but we are not racist. We've evolved from that. If you're a non-racist white person. Obviously, a racist white person couldn't say that. But if you're a non-racist white individual and you stand for that, teach your child that our family doesn't get down like this. You know, that's the difference. We have to, as parents, especially, I'm speaking to my non-racist white people, when you raise your kids and you have those categories of importance that are like drugs, alcohol, sexual activity, and you teach your child maturity in these things and what to do casually and what to not do at all and those things, we have to group racism right in. You can't leave racism out. You can't leave it neutral. You know, leaving it neutral as a non-racist white person is an injustice to society. If you know your ancestors, some of your ancestors created racism, it's your duty, not necessarily to go out your way and do all of this craziness for black folks. Just keep it real and teach real history. Call out other white supremacists. Don't let them have a comfort because it's not cool. And then basically tell the truth. You know what I mean? Tell authentic history and teach your child that we're not going to label racism as a neutral subject, but we're going to call it out. We're going to specifically stand out and stand up and say, we are not racist individuals. That's the only way that you're doing your part. Otherwise, being that silent, just stand by person is kind of a weakling position. It's a cowardice position. If you're going to ignore it and you know for a fact it exists, and you know for a fact the reason it's not happening to you if it were reversed is because your ancestors dominated other ancestors in the form of slavery, and you just are going to accept that white privilege and don't take any responsibility for ending racism, even if it's just teaching your children authentic history, which is not going out your way. It's just simply not lying to your child and calling out other races, which are wrongs that people are doing. And you should be, as an upstanding professional human being in any level, should be doing that anyway. Okay, so again, teaching authentic history, calling out white supremacists when they are acting, and also not allowing them into your personal circles to infect you or your children. Those are things that white people, that's the role of non-racist white people in demolishing the system of white supremacy. Again, this is Ray Jones. I got my click. You can click the button up top to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that we can touch base. Please leave your comments, like Black-Empowerment.org, Black-Empowerment.org on Facebook. You can also follow Black-Empowerment.org, Black-Empowerment.org on Twitter. You can follow us. Basically, we just want to get into racism and demolishing the system of white supremacy. That is the goal of Black-Empowerment.org. We are here to demolish the system of white supremacy and build a functioning black community. All right. Again, this is Ray Jones. Peace out.